Welcome back, everybody, to another Malazan video. And today I have the honor to talk to the High Fist himself, Ruthan. Hey, welcome.
Hi Raf. Thank you for having me on here. Not since rhythm and blues got together has there been such a powerful convergence of R&B as Raf Blutaxt and Ruthan Bad.
That's true. That's true. Very well. So since it's Sunday afternoon, I already did my democratic duty today and went voting. I figured I'll start with a beer. I'm not sure if you're going to drink something or not, but I'm going to do that anyway.
I'm just here to hear the pop, Raf. That's what we're all here for.
Because you can't actually guarantee a pop. We'll see what happens though. Cheers. That's better. Anyway, we wanted to talk a bit about politics in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, or politics and the Malazan Book of the Fallen, something that has recently been a bit of a, I don't want to say hot topic, but you already did a video on it a day ago or 2 days ago. I have not actually watched that one yet. I've seen Stephen Erickson sharing it though, and I'm gonna watch it at some point, which is probably later today.
I mean, don't worry about it. We're all on a busy schedule.
Oh yeah, like totally. Well, not really, but kind of this weekend. So anyway, the Malazan Book of the Fallen and politics is, I mean, there's a lot of politics going on in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and people read it as sometimes try to read Stephen Erickson's personal political views into that or out of that. There's definitely different, like, you know, situations where different people in the books comment on different aspects of politics. So where do you want to start with this today?
So I just want to start with what your take was, because you've always been someone who's touched on some of these themes as well: politics, culture, history, and stuff like that. So I guess the first question I wanted to ask you, that I wanted to get your take on, was, so what do you think, sort of, do we need to be politically objective when we read the series, or do you think the series works even when you have passionate views in your personal life?
I think political objectivity is bullshit. It doesn't exist. And of course, you can have like passionate views. They might be like, definitely have passionate political opinions all the time. And I'm not sure I agree with all the things that are said within the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but I can read books that voice opinions that are different from mine if they are, you know, well voiced, is what I'm trying to say. So it's like, I read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, I can engage with the political ideas there. I read Flashback by Dan Simmons a while ago, and I just really hated it because it was so ham-fisted. Is what I'm trying to say. There's like, you know, you can have your political opinions, but please, if you write a book, write it well.
Yeah. Have there ever been moments when you were reading the series where you were like, did he really need to touch on that, or he should have touched on this? So perhaps he should have touched on this with a wider perspective, because you said you don't agree with everything that's said politically in the book. So what's your sense when you encounter those?
Usually I because it's very rarely it's super explicit political takes. It's more like, like, for example, the whole idea, and I think the whole idea of the Tilani Mass as a as sort of a collective, and that situation, I am not sure how far along that image I want to go. So, for example, it's in House of Chains when Onrak is sort of, when the ritual is separated, basically, and he starts to be aware of himself as an individual, in a way, more aware of that. And you can read that as a metaphor for like the individuality versus collectivism in a way. And it's somehow at one point it felt for me a bit more like the individualistic side of it came across as more positive than I would probably see it, which is interesting because from when you look at like things that Stephen Erickson says in essays and stuff, he's often highly critical of like pure individualism as well.
Very.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the kind of thing that I mean. That's rarely something where I'm like fully against his political views. I mean, like the political views voiced in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Obviously, I have no idea about his personal political opinions, and they're not my problem, basically. Maybe also the way in Memories of Ice, the government of Kapustan, that religious government that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, that kind of made me a bit, like, annoyed me a bit, in a way that it seemed to be too almost a caricature, basically, of a city council in a slightly difficult way. Also, I was just sitting there, I was like, why do those guys actually have power? Why is the city actually listening to the church council? And yes, of course they have, like, why do they have like why is the like massed council the only organization that has the right to have private troops? And how does that actually work in a political system? It's like, probably not think too hard about it.
Erikson's not really known for his flattering portrayal of politicians and bureaucrats and rulers, especially when it comes to sort of human societies, I guess. One thing that you did touch on, though, that I found interesting was, so in terms of religion, what do you think? Do you think Erikson handles religion well, or do you think he caricatures it a bit?
He certainly, okay, so I think we need to distinguish between religion and faith. And I feel like he's highly critical of organized religion and the bureaucratic structures and all of that. So that makes super sense, right? Because he doesn't like that, or he criticizes, or is highly critical of that in other aspects of society as well. And what it boils down to is that church hierarchy in the end is just another hierarchy where the actual like faith doesn't play any kind of role at all. It's just, power games that are completely, distinct from, devoid of like actual religious aspects in a way, especially with the mass council. I feel it comes like that. So that's an interesting thing. I'm still, trying to figure out how the whole idea of, and that's something that's not specific to Erikson, but the question of how does religion work in a world where we know that gods are real? Because a lot of faith, I feel, is very different from knowledge, from knowing. Although people that are religious obviously think probably think themselves that they know that God exists, but there's no proof for that. But in a world like the Malazan world, we can just sit down and call Shadow Throne, and he'll show up and be annoyed at us. And that's basically that scientific proof. And it's like, how does faith work in a world where those people are, like, the gods are there?
So there would be no room for skepticism. There would be no room for atheism if they actually materialized in front of us.
There's that, but also I feel like the whole idea of hope and all these things that are like tangled up in faith, or to my mind, they basically need that minimum of uncertainty. It's like, so because it's like you pray and your prayer is not answered, and then that's okay, because whatever. But if you pray to Shadow Throne and he doesn't answer your prayer, you're just like, well, he's a dick. He doesn't care. And that's a different thing from, I'm not sure if my prayer even reached that deity, because maybe that deity doesn't really exist. But now you have like this certainty, and like, okay, that's different. But as I said, that's sort of a problem that you have in almost all fantasy worlds that have where it's baked in the rules of the world, of the universe, that gods actually exist, which is different from having a religion and you never answer the question of whether gods exist or not. So that's why I feel religion is not like a very strong aspect of the Malazan world in general, also because he doesn't give us a lot of religion. He depicts rites, and he sometimes depicts a hierarchy, which he doesn't like in a way, but we don't see like a working religion, basically.
Would you say we see sort of many religious cults but we don't really see a mainstream religious institution in the sense that we see the big ones now. Would that be a more accurate way of saying it?
No, not well, of course, that's definitely in there, but that's not my problem with it. It's like I feel it would be interesting to see how, like, any of those cults actually how they work and so forth. But we always see that caricature of power structure, and that's all. Like maybe that's the point. It's like as soon as we organize our religion, it just becomes an organization like any other, and we don't need to talk about the religious aspects of it anymore, because we only see like this, like the almost caricature of an organized religion, or we see very primitive rites, shamans and stuff like that, where religion in a way is portrayed as more like integrated in everyday life. But we don't see, we rarely see anyone in any place, just going to the temple for their regular Sunday service or whatever. All those characters are very irreligious.
I always got that puritanical religious vibe from the T.S. Lewison. I'm not too sure why, but there was just something about the way they keep referring to the Father and purity and all that. There was just something.
Well, they're religious fascists, basically.
Yeah.
Which I spoke with Niflrock about that yesterday, for a moment, that when you read the Esselmont books, that the
he treats them a lot better. Yeah, that's what you guys were discussing. I thought that was so fascinating because to me, as somebody who's predominantly read the 10 books and the others are simply just fluff that I've read through at some point of time, it's stuff like that I would completely miss out on. So when that conversation that you had with Niflrock for me was so fascinating, and I hadn't even thought of that. I hadn't even thought of how the Leosin were portrayed in a far more favorable light in the Esselmont works, because I haven't dived as deeply into them, and that for some reason completely changed the way that I looked at the T traces as well. So I mean, it just goes to show how little I know, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you have those religious, like the religious overtones there, and I feel that's probably like the best portrayal of like serious, earnest faith might just be the gray swords or the gray shields. I feel it's more like, and I'm not yet back with my current reread, not yet back where the Malazans meet up with the wolf cult again. And I'm always confusing which one is the gray swords and which one's the gray shields. But the ones in Kapustan and the other guys, and I'm like those, because their whole system works because they actually are serious believers, and we see what happens if they are not like really really serious believers, when you have that situation with Ruthan and what's his name, Canadas, right? Who knows,
Canadas,
because Canadas, that guy. It's like there you have that portrayal of actual serious religion, but they're still fanatics, right? And there's a clear downside to that. It's like you don't want to hang out with those people all the time because they're religious fanatics.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the reread that you haven't gotten there yet, so we've got to spend some time sort of on your reread experience as well, because I find that quite fascinating. Because to me, right now there are two important rereads going on YouTube, and there's one important read. The two rereads are yours and Ishkar's, in the sense that Ishkar is just for the sort of the beginner mainstream audience, and yours is a, I would say, at least you delve into some of the heavier themes and some of your own thoughts as well. And there's a new one which is a brand new reread by I think Christine Wallestad is her name. Erickson shared her sort of videos a couple of times, but where I think yours is unique is that the frame of time in which you are sort of embarking on this journey, I think makes it a unique experience, because all those other rereads, whether it's even the ones outside of YouTube, like the reread or the 10 Big Books podcast, those are all designed to last for, I guess, years in a sense, whereas you have a fresh memory going in of just some of the previous books. So just talk to me a little bit about that instant rereading experience, that fast, quick one.
Yeah, so I feel it has like upsides and downsides, I guess. It's like the danger of like basically binging, which is what I do, is like I usually read, I mean, I listen to the audiobook and it's usually like 3-4 hours per day that I spent with that. It's like, there is a danger of stuff kind of blurring together, but on the other hand, you're more, it's more immersive, right? It's like you just, at least I just feel more immersed in the world. And I realize that because like usually over the weekend, I don't read Malazan, and then when I start on Monday again, I'm like, okay, I need a couple of moments to get back into that. You know, you can feel like, it feels like that I'm, you know, experiencing the language and everything more after I've been in that mode for a while, after I've spent like 2 or 3 hours with Malazan, and then I kind of keep that going when I go like do that every day.
And are you worried about getting burnout at all? You're kind of at the halfway mark at this point. Do you regret this, or do you think this was the right choice to do this in such a short span of time?
I'm not worried about burnout because this is my third read through of the series, and the first one was more stretched out because I started, so my problem was like I wanted to read Malazan for a long time, but there weren't any audiobooks, and the alternative would be to either get an ebook version, then kill the DRM on it to actually access it for my screen reader and have my computer screen reader read that whole damn thing out to me. And that's brutal. Like, it's not really fun to listen to like synthesize like a speech synthesizer reading Malazan. That's just it's difficult with like you know, academic text that I have to read, but it's even worse with prose like that. And so I didn't do that. And then the audiobooks came out, and I like basically binged each one when it came out, but they were like half a year apart when they were released. It took like a couple of months for each to come out, and so I had to read other stuff in between. But the next time my second read through, I already did something similar. I mean, I didn't make videos about it, but I still also spent a lot, like read through them relatively fast, so I know basically what I'm doing right now, is I guess. So I'm not worried about burning out on that level. I'm a bit scared that I might just burn out on making videos about it. That's definitely real, that fear. But I'm not worried about the Malazan read through. I'm not worried about, you know, making comments about it on Iskar's Discord server or anything like that. I might just, you know, reach a point where I'm like, oh God, I don't want to make videos, because the danger is,
because
you know,
I think I was.
No, go ahead.
Go on.
All right. Yeah. So like
I was just going to say, we're too polite, Raf. One of us has to be a gentleman. Come on, go for it, Raf.
All right. As the Western European, I'm gonna, you know, pull out all my privilege and talk all over you. Anyway,
use that privilege, baby.
It feels so good. Anyway, so like my danger is like that. At some point, making the video feels like a chore, and that would be bad, because then I wouldn't be able to do it. Because I mean, basically, I go, I read, then I sit down, do something for like a half an hour or something to, you know, switch off my brain and let things settle, and then I just switch on the camera and talk about what I want to talk about, or what I still remember about the stuff that I've read today, and then that's how it works. But if it would be a chore, then it would come out as forced, and I don't want to do that. Also, I just really hate forcing myself to do anything.
Well, that shows, Raf. Trust me. I was just going to say, I think I was online on the Discord server when you were toying around with this idea of doing this.
Yeah.
I can't remember what your exact inspiration was, but what exactly was it? Because I remember you were kind of you were thinking out aloud, and there was some conversation that was going on, and you said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I can't remember what it was.
I also have like no idea. I can't remember what, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like I had like a lot of shit going on in December, what with like the record label and stuff like that, and then I basically hit a really like bit of a hole after Christmas because, you know, there's like, we still released like an album on the 25th of December, and then, but everyone was on holidays, so all the like companies, manufacturers were closed, so I couldn't actually get the the physical CDs and vinyls pressed and stuff like that. And then I had like nothing to do, and then I really hit like mentally like something of a like really dark hole and they do anything. So reading Malazan and starting the knitting thing was sort of a self-therapy thing for me to like actually do something and not just lie in bed all day. So I decided to do that and impose some kind of structure on my life to get out of there. And I did that. And then
I like how your knitting has a subset of individual fans. There's a group who come for the knitting as well. That is its own kind of subgenre of a RAF video.
The knitting thing, yeah. I mean, right now I'm doing another scarf for a friend, a musician friend in the US. I've seen my cape has reached really good and kind at this point. The cape of objective reality.
Oh yeah, yeah. In the latest video, yeah. I did see that's what I'm going to watch right after we do this, because I did see you guys laughing and joking about it on the Discord server. So that's the one that was uploaded yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
The Converse acting. Yeah.
Yeah, the cape of objective reality. I didn't know I was creating a magical item there when I did it.
Oh, thank you for telling me, because I didn't know that was yours. That would now really pop when I watched that.
No, that was like the things, like I was knitting the scarf and Cal mentioned in the comments that he asked me if I could knit a cape for him, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And then we settled on that, and then I shipped it a couple of weeks ago.
Nice. I like how there's a sort of everybody knows how to use the sort of the rest of our skills as well. So yeah. Now that we have you as a knitter, we've got to have some running gags with your knitting, Raf. Come on, we've got to figure something out.
Yeah, I'll start knitting shirts with different size sleeves and yellow and gray trousers at some point.
Yeah. I just want something from you that says non-Western perspective.
All right, I can do that. I'll have to figure out how to actually get the lettering in there, because that's a bit more difficult, but I can do that.
Well, we can come up with some pretentious imagery and we can just tell people that that's what it stands for. Come on, we're the kings of being pretentious.
That's true. Let's do that. It's going to be a knitted Rorschach, basically.
Exactly, and you've got to be a postmodernist to get it. If not, you suck.
That's very good. But let's go back to the politics part. I mean, you already talked about the politics in there. How do you stand towards that? Like, what do you think about having political ideas and stuff mentioned in something that is essentially fantasy fiction? Well, it's more than fantasy fiction.
Yeah, there was a time when I enjoyed politics in fiction. There was a time when I was in university and probably in my sort of early 20s, mid 20s, when I did enjoy that. But it's just that at some point, and maybe this observation aligns with some people and doesn't align with others, but it just seems like so many writers these days get so preachy. They get so, this isn't I suppose confined to any particular political stance or political ideology. It's almost like every writer wants to convey some kind of huge social message now. Every writer wants to be sort of this big intellectual. I sometimes find that a little condescending. For example, I can't watch movies that the Hollywood elite, for instance, make, because so much of it is just finger wagging, and it kind of makes me roll my eyes a little bit. But in general, I just feel that politics in fiction is a good thing if you do it the George Orwell way, but perhaps not a very good thing if you bludgeon us as the readers over and over again with it.
Well, I guess it depends on whether it's like the main point of the fiction is to convey your politics, or it's, you know, the writer being a political person, by which I mean someone who has opinions on politics, and those kind of informing their writing style, because they're writing, because that's something that I guess is very difficult to avoid. It's like your personality will always inform your writing.
For sure.
And that's very good. And I still enjoy, I always say I like angry writers. I like angry writers, where you can feel that they are sort of driven to writing to express their frustration with the universe, with the world. And that's usually also political frustration, which is why I, for example, really like the stuff that Richard K. Morgan puts out, or China Miéville, because yes, they're left. I'm personally a left-leaning person, so I enjoy that. But I also have like no problem with someone like Robert E. Howard, who is also, well, he was an existentialist and a nihilist and all of those things. But I feel there is this underlying strength in the writing, in the prose, because this person wants to do something. They feel driven to go out there and vent their frustration in a way. And I feel that I'd rather have that than someone who just, is a craftsman and just writes because that's his job. I don't like that part. Like, if it comes across as too, yeah, that's just what I do.
Yeah, and with Robert E. Howard especially, I never the racial stuff never really bothered me that much. I mean, he does go off on, he does like his audience. That is for sure. Raf, which is that you would be the right person to answer this. Which is that story where Conan gets into this battle of strength with this big buff black warrior, and the two of them have this battle of strength, and then even the way Howard writes it, or the whatever the Aryan racial blood whatever takes over, and Conan wins that. It's one of the ones with a really rushed ending where they run. I mean, I guess most of them are rushed as well. I can't remember. It's the story where Conan faces off against someone, and Howard writes, "You might be a skilled fencer or a boxer, but you can't beat a jaguar or a leopard," or something like that. It's that same story. I can't remember what it was.
Well, there's a bunch of them, so I'm not sure. Is that the one with the cannibal cult? There's that one is, I think it's Shadows in Zamboula or something like that. That was never officially.
It could be.
Where he goes to that temple and has this like there's this huge black wrestler basically who's trained to crush skulls for
yes.
yeah,
yes.
that's the one. That Shadows in Zamboula is that one. That one is brutally racist, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but I enjoyed. I was just going to say I enjoyed it because I enjoyed the way he wrote it and the way Conan kind of his Aryan heritage or whatever triumphed in the end. I did find it interesting though that in one of his other things, which is the other one where he's kind of got a gunslinger rap like Solomon something.
Solomon Kane, yeah, that one is way more racist because that. I mean, I guess the racism pops out more. Same with H.P. Lovecraft, because suddenly you're in like the 16th century in our world and not like the Hyborian age, and suddenly he's not talking about degenerate, using his words like degenerate people in Kush or somewhere there, but suddenly he's talking about people in real existing countries, and that makes the racism more obvious, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and I always found it weird. Sometimes when I think about it, I sometimes think of how oblivious I was, because growing up, many of my friends were fans of H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard when we were teenagers. But it wasn't until I got to university in England when I found out that the entire thing was quote unquote racist. As in, all my friends reading it, they weren't, I mean, as in, we were big fans, but it was only once I got to university in England that the racial context even came in. Ironically, us growing up as a bunch of brown boys, that did not, perhaps maybe because we were used to that. It's kind of like that British sitcom Mind Your Language, which is a huge hit in India and all the countries where the characters there are caricatures of people belonging to those countries. But ironically, it cannot be played in the United Kingdom anymore to a large audience because it would be racially insensitive or whatever. I always found that quite interesting. What do you think of that? I want to know what you think of that. Was I just being naive, or do you think that in some cultures this is simply not that big a deal? Some of us are just used to those portrayals, so we see past that.
That's a very interesting question. So see, I'm a still rather active member of a student organization, because I'm technically still in a PhD student and so forth, but I'm technically, so I'm in that students organization for history students. And it says international, but its main focus is, for whatever reason, is Eastern Europe and the Balkans. And what that does is, like, they have also, like, already a very different perspective on all kinds of highly problematic political slash racist jokes, which, especially with the Balkans, is a big issue, because their civil war is not that long ago, right?
Yeah.
And people from, like, Germany or, like, the western part of Europe, a lot of them are shocked when they first see, like, a Serb, a guy from Bosnia, and someone from Croatia sitting together telling racist jokes about each other.
Yeah.
And that works. So in a way, I feel it's like, I mean, so, like, everyone is racist, just, like, by definition, because we all have some kind of racist thoughts in our minds, and that's one thing. But as someone in a group that usually, so as someone that is more often the victim of racism by the more like the currently more powerful group of humans, is what I'm trying to say here. So as a brown person, a person of color, you can obviously laugh about racist jokes made about brown, like, people of color. That's no problem. You kind of have that right. The question then is, and some of those things are, like, fun, like some racist jokes are sort of funny,
So fun. So
is
funny, some of them.
yeah, I mean, some of them, because, a lot of those jokes are built on some cliches, and if you live in a situation where you have that, where you see people that are these living cliches. I mean, there's great jokes about Germans, for example, that you could probably see as racist, because they are, but they make sense. They're like, I have the same thing with people with handicaps, right? There's no one who tells so many stupid jokes about blind people than like blind people, right? Because that's just that, these people, and you get that kind of humor. But it's also is, the idea of owning your, like, if someone tries to denigrate you, you got to own it and be proud about it. And I guess that's the other half of that bit. Plus, I feel, to be, like, kind of back to Lovecraft and Howard, I think they're different in a way. I mean, yes, you have to consider in which times their stuff was written, and being a fan of eugenics and racism in 1930s Texas is not the same as being that today, because eugenics was still considered like actual, science at the time, at least for some people. And like, so there's a difference there. The problem I feel is that with Howard, it's less obvious. With Lovecraft, it's more obvious. Lovecraft does actually attach value judgments to that. Like, Howard is more the kind of, different, there's different human races, which, is scientific bullshit, but there's different human races and they have different aspects. There's actually a story, it's a King Cole story, it's a fragment, where he has Cole of Atlantis sitting there with Brule, the spear slayer, who's obviously a Pict. Like, in that incarnation, Picts are different from later incarnations of Picts, but yeah, he's a Pict. And the third one is someone that is never mentioned again, some nobleman from Beluga, actually. And they're sitting there, and it's a really short fragment. And I don't know what the story should have been about, but basically they're sitting there and playing a game, I think some kind of fantasy variant of chess. And it then goes off in typical Howard philosophizing mode, and he's like, yeah, they're very, very different. They're from different races. One is like this wild pig, the other one is the Proto-Aryan, the third one is this Eastern effeminate, not effeminate, some like decadent Eastern Orientalist whatever list of cliches he pulls out there. And he does that, and but it's like, but in the end, they're all the same, because what they have is that true man, soul, spirit thing, whatever. So he kind of defies, like, his point is like, there's different races who have different strengths and weaknesses, but because he's very much an existentialist and about individual strength and will, like that. So he's like, yeah, but like, no matter which background you're from, if you have that like Ubermensch kind of soul, then that's like your true like kindred, basically. And Lovecraft attaches, he's like, yeah, there's human races, and mixing them is bad, because Lovecraft is way more in the eugenics camp, and he's like, mixing those different races is bad, and those people are degenerate by definition. So he actually attaches a value judgment and says like, white good, color bad, mixing even worse. And Howard doesn't do that much. He's more like, yeah, they're different, and they have different like strengths and weaknesses. And I personally, like, speaking as Howard, is like, me as a huge blonde Texan, I'm obviously in favor of white people and think that's the coolest thing to be, but there's also, you know, other like people that are great, and that's a difference there, I feel. Also, once again, Lovecraft writes mostly in our real world, so the racism becomes more obvious. It's more on the nose and more difficult to to actually deny or ignore, at least for me.
So let's make this a little more controversial now. Where would you say you stand on the issue of race? So maybe I should just throw something out controversial before we come to you. So I would pretty much agree with the sort of the overall premise that you laid out there of what Howard's stance was, in the sense that I am not a subscriber to the idea of racial superiority, but I am a subscriber to the idea that different races have different characteristics. So, for example, I don't think it's a coincidence that if we go through the record holders for the 100-meter race, let's say, I don't think it's a coincidence that most of the guys on that list would belong to one particular racial background. So whereas today it almost seems to be everywhere we go, the cliche seems to be that we're all the same under the color of our skin, that the only thing different is the melanin pigment or whatever. And I understand that that's the sort of the consensus right now. So where do you stand on this?
Okay, so I guess it really depends on what you mean by we're all the same. Does every person have the same rights? Does everyone is the same as being a human being, having a personality, having a soul? I don't want to use the word soul because I don't believe in souls, but you know, there is that, and those things are all the same, and they are maybe like the only thing that makes us as persons, the people that we are, is our circumstances. Our society is all like our circumstances for me. That there are obviously physical differences that are genetic and inherited in that way, and that are also obviously informed by your like life situation, by malnutrition or what have you, and whether you grow up in a warm climate or a cold climate, and all these stuff. I guess that's undeniable in a way. The question is, does it matter? And I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. It's like, do you take like, it's the same with other like physical aspects, right? It's like, if you want to be like a fighter pilot, you can't be 2 meters tall. That just doesn't work because there's not enough room in that kind of thing. Same with like, I don't know there's other things like that, right? So that's physical aspects that are very difficult to change. But everything else, like, I don't know, as human beings, we're all the same when it comes to all these aspects of our personality and person, and that's what I believe. So their race or like inheritance shouldn't matter. It obviously informs who we are, but in a way that should be changeable, because ideally we should all have a great upbringing and have live in situations where we don't suffer from any like negative aspects, and then we can all be like fulfill our our own like our fullest potential in a way. And that should not be connected to, that is not connected to where we like biologically connected to anything. And that's what matters to me, I guess.
And would you say you're much more of an old school leftist on bigger issues like that, or are you much more of a sort of cultural woke leftist? Or I mean, I'm not too sure how to sort of give you a proper, accurate dichotomy. So, but I guess you know what I'm talking about. There are these old school leftists, and there's the kind of new generation leftists. Where would you fall ideologically?
Ideologically, that's a very, I try not to be too ideological. I personally think I'm somewhere in the middle. I try to keep up with developments. I'm obviously active in some, local left-wing culture center and stuff like that. So I definitely try to keep up with identity theory and stuff like that. But I also see, I'll also try to, keep the goal of also economic equality, I try to keep that in sight and not just focus on questions of identity at this point, because there's this trend right now that you focus on these things, and they are very, very important for me. That it makes a lot of sense that having justice there when it comes to your your group where you where you fall into your like gender identity, racial, like ethnic identity, and all of these things. Those are very, very important things. And ideally having equality and justice and freedom there will lead to other things, but I don't think that that's all that matters, right? There's other circumstances that lead to injustice in the world than just those things. They might just be the ones that are easiest to change right now, because literally it shouldn't cost us anything to allow anyone to be whoever they want. In that case, it's just language, for fuck's sake, that people need to change sometimes. And like, why not? We've been doing that ever since we started speaking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I asked that was because one of the interesting parts of Ericsson's post, in the long post in response to my the Tilanamas video, was he sort of just makes a throwaway reference there of, oh, you know what, Marx was right. And if you don't like that, just go back and read Marx. Or if you don't like that, go back and look at the world. As in terms of Marx's breakdown of how economic thinking works and how societies often function based on these resource-based, I guess that's what Ericsson meant, that objectively speaking, Marx was right. What's your take on Marx and that general sort of thing?
I agree. Marx has made very interesting and very valid observations on human society. What he definitely needed was a good editor, which is why the Communist Manifesto is so much better than anything else he wrote, because he wrote that with Engels, and it's actually a really well-written pamphlet. But if you read Marx's other writings, that guy couldn't write to save his life, same as Kant. Like super long sentences, and sometimes there's not even a fucking verb in there. It's like you read this like one-page sentence, and then you go back like, no, there's just, it's just a long sentence that doesn't have any verb in it. That doesn't make sense. So there's that. But when in this general analysis of the world, Marx has a lot of valid points. Now, if you then go and draw the same conclusions from that he does, that's a different thing. But the analysis is very valid, I'd say.
Because I have seen reviewers, just random reviewers on sites like Goodreads, because back before the whole YouTube boom began, I had to get my Malazan fix, pathetically reading Amazon reviews and Goodreads reviews. And I did find a lot of people sort of characterizing Ericsson as a quote-unquote leftist writer because of this materialist approach to explaining larger question. So Erikson sort of, especially in a book like Reaper's Gale and Midnight Tides, where he talks about the sort of the direct link between deforestation and war, the direct link between resource shortages and civilizations and kingdoms having that predatory instinct in
Yeah.
them. I've heard Erikson criticized as a leftist, and obviously since it's Marx, would that be a fair criticism that Erikson is a left-leaning, at least on this sense that he is kind of left-leaning?
That's a good question. So it depends on what you mean by left-leaning. Like seriously, I wouldn't say Marx is a left. Like yes, in his like the things
True.
that he proposes, but the analysis should be like basically at this point. I'd say the difference between left and right is left-leaning people sit there and look at the world and say, yeah, the world is fucked. We need to do something about it. People are fucked depending on where they're sitting, where they grow up. And we need to change that. Whereas like right-leaning people are, well, the world is fucked, but it's everyone is to blame for their own being fucked, and that's I guess the difference there. And what I get from Erikson's writing, and what I get especially when you read something like Rejoice, and when you read like his essays and stuff that he posts, it's like he realized and obviously had a very interesting life so far and has made a lot of experiences that I kind of don't envy him for. But on the other hand, that informed that he knows the world is fucked and mostly it's humans fucking the world. So he kind of gets that point. And he doesn't, propose any like, he's not getting preaching about what we should do about it, but the analysis that we have certainly run this place down, our society's down in a way by being humans not thinking enough. That part is there. And if that makes him left, then definitely he's left. I would just not say that that's left. That's just realistic to actually realize that that's how the world is right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating that you say that, because in this part of the world, in Sri Lanka and India, for example, you have plenty of right-leaning ethno-nationalist parties, all quoting Marx as their foundation. In India and South India particularly, you will find many linguistic nationalist right-leaning groups who all sort of worship Marx, because to them, their form of emancipation is once again a rejection of religion, a rejection of the class system, and stuff like that. So in this part of the world, right-wingers embrace Marx with the same ferocity as well. To them, it's just economics. It's not left or right.
Yeah. And I guess that's the only way to read Marx these days. Is like you read him as an economic thinker. That's what you do. And I mean, the guy wrote in the 19th century. Obviously, his like solutions for problems are no longer valid because the world has changed since then. But the analysis is the thing that you should look at. Same with, like, I don't know, Adam Smith. Don't use him as a Bible or whatever. But he certainly had some interesting thoughts there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just kind of touch on one more important kind of political theme in the books, which I mean, you've mentioned this in your videos before. I've mentioned this in my videos before as well. But the whole idea of empire is a kind of cliched thing that often gets thrown around when it comes to Erikson's sort of writing, because everybody talks about how he covers empire and blah blah blah. I mean, I've done it as well. In terms of him bringing this political objectivity to the portrayal of empire, I kind of touched on that as well. I want to know what your take was.
Okay, so so let's make people angry with like a political statement of my personal political opinion there, and then we go on about the empire stuff. I personally think that the nation state is a problem. How to say, the nation state was a mistake a lot of people made in the 19th century, and it should definitely be abolished because it's not what we usually think in. It's not what humans thinking. We think regional. We think like our like local region, and then we already hate the people in the village across, the next hill rise, right? And once you add the nation state to that, you suddenly need to construct a narrative of why you are better than everyone else, and from there on, stuff becomes problematic. From there on grows the idea of nationalism, because you always you have to construct that. It's like suddenly you don't no longer just know that you're better than the guys in that other village, because you know those people basically, and you meet every year for the village festival, get drunk, and beat each other up, because that's how these things work, at least in Germany. But the point there is you suddenly construct a larger narrative, and narratives are super powerful, and it's very difficult to get out of that. And I kind of touched on that one video when I spoke about Letheras. I feel Lether is the more interesting, at least in Ericsson's writing, Lether is the more interesting empire compared to the Malazan Empire, because we actually get more info about it. I spoke what I said with Niflrug yesterday, right? We don't actually see that much of the Malazan Empire in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, because we're mostly outside of the empire. But with Letheras, we have that thing that I call it like Lethery exceptionalism, which is so similar to American exceptionalism in a way, because you suddenly connect, you get this weird connection of your nation being favored by God, having destiny, having destiny and providence on your side. And that is just a really, really toxic ideology that then leads to predation on other people, even outside of the just economic necessity, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here, right?
Should we abolish the nation state system, Raf? Come on.
Of course.
Give me a nice invite.
I am all in favor of abolishing the nation state.
Okay. I mean, let me just, I guess, add to the controversy then, and add in my non-Western perspective on why the nation state doesn't really work either, at least from in this part of the world. Unfortunately or fortunately, for millennia, we've always been a monarchy, and that's how this part of the world has always functioned. Unfortunately, in the second half of the 20th century, after the Indian freedom struggle, the Sri Lankan freedom struggle, the Burmese freedom struggle, and all that, when the British left, we did not revert to our old days of monarchy. We kind of went into a Westphalian parliamentary democracy, nation state type system. And the problem is, if you look at all the prime ministers and presidents in my part of the world, it's the grandfather, the father, the son, right? The mother, the daughter. So even though we've shifted into a parliamentary democracy system, that inherent tendency to deviate towards monarchies, that sort of that inherent tendency that these societies have to vote to see the father and then the son and then the grandson, or the mother and then the daughter as the rightful rulers, that hereditary ruler mentality is very much evident even among the people in this part of the world. Even when you give those guys a vote, they vote for useless politicians as long as that person was the son of the previous person or the grandson of the previous person. So I would say the nation state system in this part of the world, people don't even know why we have a nation state. They have no inherent social or cultural affinity towards a nation state. And I don't know, we should probably just go back to a monarchical system, since that's what people in this part of the world want. But I would probably be pelted with stones if I sort of mention that out on the roads here. So yeah, I can do it on the safety of the internet and in the safety of your channel, Raf. Protect me.
I certainly will protect you there. But see, I guess the problem is there, like, the nation state is a fictional construct. But I feel the more important thing there, what you said, like what it basically shows is, like, one of the things that Ericsson also does kind of show in the Malazan Book of the Fallen that several times, or at least points at, is the big problem with colonialism is that you can't go back, right? Even, you know, once the British graciously gave you guys back your freedom, which is
so kind, so
kind of them, right? But it changed it changes places, right? They stay changed. Even though, like, in the propaganda during a freedom struggle, you always like go on about tradition, and where going back to your own, like, not nation, but, you know, you're going back to your own spiritual history and so forth. But that doesn't work. You can't go you can't turn time back. Things that happened happened, and that's the big problem. And they changed everything, so you can't go back. And that's the big problem there. And I think Erikson shows that in a bunch of situations, especially once again in the lethargy part, but also very much in House of Chains and Bone Hunters. I looked at that. That one is, I feel, is like the very important there, right? In the Bone Hunters, we have two cities where the Faladin that were like reared up during the rebellion are still nominally in charge at the beginning. That's Ugarit where Karsa goes, and that's Igatan where when Leoman shows up. And those people in power, they're nominally in power, are fucking useless. The one is like a drug addict, and the other one is a kid. And they are only in power because because they try to return to like tradition, and it doesn't work. Because on the other hand, the one actually in power in Igatan is basically Dunsparrow, who is still a Malazan person, right? And in Ugarit, it's also like just not, you can't go back even if you throw off the colonial yoke. You still have to deal with the actual fact of where you are at that point. And I feel like Erikson shows that relative like very clearly in those situations in the Bone Hunters, basically.
Mm-hmm. Are you dreading the sort of the Yogatan moment as you get to the Bone Hunters, or are you looking forward to it because it's a pretty intense sequence?
I'm just through it, actually. I finished.
Oh, you got through it?
I got through it. I finished Bone Hunters book 2 yesterday. No, Friday. I finished it on Friday.
Okay,
I'm gonna
okay.
start
I saw your
3.
book 1 rant. I didn't see the book 2 video yet.
No. I've gone through the Igatan sequence, and I found it very interesting in different ways. Like the Igatan scene, that chapter 7, that whole like super long one, is, I mean, you could just use it, like it's so visual in a way. It always reminds me more of like Black Hawk Down than actually like D-Day when it comes to like the fight sequences. I mean, just because you have like more like urban combat and stuff like that, it's just made so it's written in a very cinematic way. You can just like take these sequences in Igatan, those street fighting sequences, and you can just use them as your and film them the way they are written, I guess, is the interesting part there. And then you obviously have that whole situation when they are crawling out of the hill, and that has a whole like different aspects to it. I still find like Leoman as a character very interesting. This idea of the cynic throwing away everything, because when you compare Leoman to like leaders in fallen countries in history that still throw away a lot of lives, what Erikson does with Leoman is he makes it very clear that Leoman knows what he's doing. Leoman is not a fanatic. He's not a delusional fanatic. He's very cold-blooded about the whole thing that he does there. It's very self-centered. And the question then is that a comment on how like people in power, fallen potentates act in general, or is that just this character Leoman? Because I don't know. Okay, I'm the German. I can mention Hitler, right? The question is like, how aware of what he was doing? How cynical was Hitler in the last, couple of weeks in Berlin when everything was already fallen? Everyone around him basically knew that it was done. And how much of that is cynical manipulation of other people, and how much of that is just delusion? That's a question that Leoman kind of asks, because Leoman is the ultimate cynic there, the self-centered cynic, basically.
But don't you think Hitler would have been pretty convinced that what he did and what he sort of in his mind what he sort of embarked on, what the things that he did, don't you think he would have been pretty sort of don't you think he would have had a strong moral conviction? I don't know. I'm just asking you.
I have very few like opinions on Hitler. I think he was crazy to start with and an asshole. And he certainly kind of believed in what he was doing at the beginning. I'm just not sure how aware of his surroundings he was at the end. But I'm also someone who avoids contemporary and modern history as much as possible. So I have not actually looked at any, sources and stuff that is out there. Also, we have a very, very, at least in Germany, we have a very problematic obsession with the guy as a one person, and tend to ignore the system around that person. And that's, I feel, is a big problem in general. Is like to almost demonize Hitler helps to ignore the fact that everyone else was going along with it in a way.
What's that famous movie about Hitler? I think Downfall was the English name.
Yeah, in German it's Der Untergang. Yeah, Downfall is actually.
Right.
Yeah.
There was I remember a scene at the end of that, which I always found fascinating, of where he knows he's defeated. Yeah. And he sort of has this small conversation with his remaining supporters, and he still says, "Oh, I'm proud that I stood up to the Jewish threat. I'm proud that I sort of tried to bring lost glory back to the Aryan race and whatever." Of course, that's just the movie. But I've always been fascinated, especially since you drew that Leoman parallel, because I always saw the relationship between Leoman and Korab kind of as a metaphor for a political figure and the obsessed follower.
Yeah. That's definitely in there. And the situation, you can really literally notice in the writing when Korab realizes that he has been played, and it takes a very long time. I think the point that we can draw from there is that if we are like all of us, I would read Korab as a warning. The point is, like, we as people, once we believe in something, right, we certainly stick with that until the absolute bitter end, where like everyone around us knows that we're wrong, but we still believe and go on. And that's something that is very human in general, right? Whether it's political or it's staying in a highly problematic relationship that is bad for you, but you still keep on doing it.
We all go through the 5 stages, no matter how dumb it looks in retrospect. Absolutely. Yeah. And I kind of like how his final death in the crippled god was over the body of the crippled god, almost kind of protecting him. It's almost like he did get away from that hold, that hero worship that he had for Leoman and the betrayal of it. But at the same time, he also had the sort of the noble end that he wanted at the altar of a really, really noble cause. Because the heartbreaking thing with Korab is how convinced he is that he's on the right side, and we can see the whole time that he's not.
Yeah. And it takes, like, the way it is done is so good, because it takes a lot of time for him to realize that under Igatan, and it's Fiddler once again who does it, because Fiddler is like the catalyst for so many things in that story. By just being very, very human, being the almost idealized everyman in a way, with all these special talents that he has, but doesn't want to have, and doesn't, acknowledge that he has them for a long time. So he's like the personified everyman. And once Korab has to deal with him, he kind of realized that, like, human core of everyone, and realizes at least that the Malazans as a whole are not just like the demons and the enemy. And then from there on he goes out, but he still, retains his own like moral code of honor and stuff like that.
Okay, I mean, now that you mentioned Fiddler, should we keep the Whiskey Jack can of worms for another video, or should we open that can of worms now? What do you think?
Let's open it. I don't know. Yeah, let's open it, and we can still, I can still cut it into like 2 parts or whatever. Although
whatever. I mean, I mean, essentially for those of you who are watching, Raf and I are not the biggest Whiskey Jack fans. I'm sorry, guys. We apologize, right? I'm just a third world savage, and Raf is a communist German. So please forgive us for our lack of judgment here. But Raf, I don't think Whiskey Jack, I mean, once again, it's kind of like the Rake thing where I don't necessarily feel that he's a badly written character, and I do agree that Ishka, Jarak, and what's done later on there, I always find interesting, the Ishka, Jarak parts. But as Whiskey Jack itself, do you think he deserves the unbridled love that he gets from the fan community?
No, well, I personally love him for always having a keg of
You're going to
ale
throw
in
me
his
under the
tent.
bus, Raf? You said
No. I just want to say I really love the fact that in Memories of Ice, he's the guy who always wanted to be a bar guy, because he always offers to everyone, hey, I have this keg of Gretfalan ale, I need to drink it with you. I do love that part, but no, I have the same problem with Whiskey Jack that you have also had with Anomander Rake, and that's just like, it gets pushed in our face that everyone loves him. So everyone reading that is also like, yeah, Whiskey Jack must be this noble, charismatic dude. And it's like, no, he's not. He's a rundown old guy who should have gotten out of the army 10 years ago. That's what he is. And he has
why do you think he gets so much love? Is it just the way Erikson portrays him as being the leader of the pack, or do you think there's something that you and I don't appreciate that other fans do?
I think it's a combination of both. What I personally don't like with him, he's like this, almost the archetypal strong silent type, and a lot of people like honorable, strong, silent type. A lot of people feel drawn to that. Just like, Rake is the dark, mysterious, suffering guy that a lot of people fall for. Whiskey Jack is that noble, strong, honorable person. A lot of people are drawn to that. And I don't know. I just feel that he feels to be too good to be true in a way, and I get suspicious by that because I'm a suspicious bastard. you tell me someone is good and noble and regrets all his past mistakes and is like the best person ever, and I'm like, oh, that sounds sus. I'm not gonna trust that.
Yeah, and to be fair, Erikson does make us pay a price for first impressions. He kind of bludgeons us over the head sometimes when we have the first impression of a character, and then it turns out that we think the character is useless, and the character turns out to be powerful, or we think the character is evil. Like the conversation that AP and Philip Chase had on Memories of Ice, where AP spoke about Teshren and how to this day he sort of gets a bad taste in his mouth whenever he encounters Teshren, precisely because of that first impression that that Erikson creates. In general, though, what would your Malazan type be? So, for example, Councillors is clearly the T standee. I have my own obsession with Quick Ben and Baukelane and the sort of the majors and stuff like that. As you said, some people gravitate towards the honorable, gruff, silent, strong types like Whiskey Jack. What's your type?
My Malazan type. Now, that's a good question. Very much so, either Tehol or Mapo.
Interesting. Two very different characters, though.
Yeah, because I'm torn between. I do really like Tehol as the self-mocking, very smart person. I'm personally very much drawn to that kind of person, and I really appreciate Mapo for the unconditional, rawness of his emotions and how he actually just is very, very honest about what he does after a while. It's definitely not healthy for him, but I do appreciate that a lot.
Would you say you find Tehol more relatable, but Mapo more respectable or whatever?
Probably. I don't know. I don't want to say I find Tehol relatable, because that's, yeah, well, I'd love to be. So basically, it's like I feel like Mapo is the kind of person I'd like to be, and Tehol is the kind of person I tend to gravitate towards. Yeah.
So, for example, let's say there was some kind of Dungeons and Dragons campaign going on, right? And someone said, you know what, the character you are playing has to be somewhat modeled on the characteristics and whatever of a Malazan character. So mine would be Quick Ben, obviously. That's what I would immediately gravitate to. So what would yours be? Would it be Tehol, or are there characters in whom you just see something that you enjoy other than that?
I guess whom I would probably go towards is, and I can't remember her name right now. She, yes, the mortal sword of the wolves in Dust of Dreams and so forth.
Oh, is her name Krugava?
Krugava, yeah, that's her. Right, that's the one. Yeah, that one. Because as someone who is very much not religious, I very much enjoy playing. I've played too much Dungeons and Dragons, I guess. Like I very much love playing true believer religious fanatics. Also, she's a badass fighter, and fighters are always easier to play because you don't have to remember all those spells.
Okay, so you do the whole meta trick of let me pick a trope that I can now dismantle during my role-playing experience. Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. I've played a lot of paladins in my time. Is what I'm trying to say here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always pegged you down as a wizard, Raf, but never mind, paladins are all right as well.
Well, in my last Dungeons and Dragons game, I played a wizard. That's true. Like it was Dungeons and Dragons 5, and I played a wizard who was setting stuff on fire all the time because I like to set stuff on fire. That's just.
Well, that's always reassuring to hear, Raf. That's always reassuring to hear.
Well, you're half a world away, so you're safe for the most part.
Exactly. Sort of, my German arsonist friend has sort of interesting hobbies that I can turn a blind eye to. Yes.
Well, I do that to all hobbies.
Oh, zing. Oh, good one, Raf. Yeah, you're right. Blind people do have the best blind people jokes.
I don't know. Anyway, I've run out of beer.
Okay, I mean, this was enormous fun. We obviously have to do it sometime soon. Hopefully, we triggered a whole bunch of people. But if they haven't been triggered, now that you have the magic of editing at your fingertips, Raf, you've got to have me back on.
I will certainly do that very soon, I guess. I hope.
Always a pleasure.
Very much so. All right. That gives me enough time to actually cut off. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Shit. I'm scared. I need to talk with Ericsson and AP tonight, and I wasn't aware of that until I checked my emails and got like a Zoom invite from AP, and I'm like, oh fuck.
You know what? There was so much stuff that you touched on your previous video with AP. We could have just done an entire video dissecting some of the stuff that you guys mentioned there. So did AP put up the hard and soft magic system video after your chat or before it?
He put it up after that. He sent me an email, like when we planned our like conversation. He said that he has recorded a hard and soft magic video, but not put up yet. And then we talked, and then he put the video up after that.
Okay, I like how you and Ericsson are on one side and AP is on the other.
We'll see how that goes tonight. I mean, I don't know yet.
Yeah, awesome. Looking forward to it.
But man, like AP is so much fun to talk to.
I mean, I will hopefully be talking to him soon about some of the Baukelane stuff sometime next week. Cool. Man, that guy's just he's got the knowledge, and he's also got the sort of the ability to just wing it when he needs to and just go on a tangent when he needs to. Yeah. That you did with him was so enjoyable.
Yeah, I just love that fact when we started the video and he just like puts out that philosophy things like with that.
Oh my God, Raf! I wanted to say, my God, Raf, can you just edit this bit into the video, right? I've got to ask you to do the "What's your philosophy" thing, Raf. Come on.
I can try to do that. Yeah.
Do you mind editing that? Yeah. Okay. So Raf, please, for me, please do the "What's your philosophy" line.
Shit. Fuck. See, I need to remember him because I don't have a
Okay, cool.
philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. No, no. I mean,